I never believed in forever. Not until her. Her name was Emily Carson. It was late September when we met, the kind of early fall day where the sunlight lingers like a soft promise, and the world feels like it's pausing, just for a moment, to let you catch your breath. I'd just moved into a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon. I was 32, a freelance photographer who lived off travel gigs and caffeine. New house, new town, new everything. I wasn't looking for anything or anyone. Honestly, I was still nursing the bruises from a few mistakes I'd made in LA, love among them. Then she showed up at my door with a slice of homemade apple pie and a smile like sunlight breaking through cloud cover. Hi. I live across the street. Figured I'd welcome the new guy the old-fashioned way. I stared at her for a beat too long. Red hair pulled into a loose bun, freckles dancing across her cheeks, eyes like stormy green glass, you could see the weather changing in them. She wore a paint-smeared sweater, and her fingers were ink-stained. Artist? I asked. She grinned. Writer. I paint when I don't know what to write. I swear, it was like something clicked. Like the background noise of my life dulled, and suddenly I could hear a new melody, quiet, unexpected, beautiful. We started slow. Coffee on my porch that turned into dinners at hers. She introduced me to her favorite books. I showed her my photography, something no one else had really seen. She told me I looked at the world like it was worth saving. One night, she pulled me up onto the rooftop of her little house. Close your eyes, she said. Why? Because some things aren't meant to be seen. They're meant to be felt. So I did. I heard the wind, the distant hum of traffic, the way her breath hitched when I reached for her hand. And in that moment, I knew. I was falling, hard. We made our own world, Emily and I. One built on stolen Sunday mornings, late-night music sessions, and dreams scribbled onto napkins. She told me she believed in soulmates, but not in the usual way. Not some magical person destined to complete you. No, she whispered once, her head on my chest. A soulmate is someone who sees you, really sees you, and still stays. I told her I wasn't always good at being seen. She said, then let me be the first. I was alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. She made everything vivid. The colors of the trees, the warmth in my chest, the sudden ache I felt when she smiled at someone else for too long. I didn't even realize I was falling in love until I looked at her one morning, sunlight dripping down her face like honey, and the thought hit me so hard it knocked the wind out of me. I want forever with her. There were small signs, even then. Times when her fingers trembled just slightly as she wrote. When her eyes glazed over mid-sentence. But I didn't ask. I thought maybe it was stress, or a lack of sleep. We were both dreamers, dreamers run themselves ragged sometimes. That's what I told myself. I didn't know the clock was already ticking. But for that one season, for those golden weeks between summer and fall, we lived inside something rare. Something sacred. And I would have given anything to make it last forever. The first time I noticed it, she was staring at nothing. It was mid-November, just after the leaves had turned to brittle gold and the air smelled like firewood and change. Emily was sitting on the porch swing, legs tucked underneath her, a book forgotten on her lap. She wasn't reading. She wasn't doing anything. She was just staring. I stepped outside and nudged her shoulder. You okay? I asked. She blinked, looked at me like she was waking up from a dream. Yeah, she said. Just thinking. But she wasn't just thinking. I knew her too well by then. In the days that followed, it became harder to ignore. She started canceling plans, saying she was tired. When we did hang out, she seemed distracted, like she was living one step behind the moment. I'd talk, and she'd nod, but her mind was somewhere else. One night, I found her in the bathroom. The shower was running, but she was sitting on the floor, fully dressed, soaking wet. She looked up at me, eyes wide, hollow. I forgot why I came in here. I helped her up. Dried her off. held her until she stopped shivering. She didn't explain, and I didn't push. But I started to worry. Really worry. Maybe you should see someone, I said gently, a week later. A doctor, maybe. She smiled at me like I was a child who didn't understand the world. It's nothing. Everyone zones out sometimes. Except it wasn't zoning out. It was vanishing, slowly, piece by piece. There were moments when she was still her. Laughing at dumb jokes, writing for hours, kissing me like she was setting fire to the world. And then, moments when she wasn't. She started forgetting little things. Where she left her keys. Whether she'd eaten. Entire conversations we'd had just days before. Her hands trembled more. Some mornings she'd wake up disoriented, calling me by the wrong name. Once, during a late-night walk, she stopped in the middle of the street and turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. When I'm not me anymore, please don't leave. Please don't let me be alone." I felt something sharp twist in my chest. I pulled her in close, trying to hold her tighter than the fear clawing at the back of my mind. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. But I was lying. Not intentionally, not to her. I was lying to myself. Because part of her was already leaving. And I didn't know how to stop it. Weeks passed. Winter crept in. She stopped writing altogether. Her once colorful little house grew quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. I took her to a neurologist after she fainted in the kitchen. She resisted at first, but I insisted. We sat in a sterile white room for what felt like hours. I held her hand. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The doctor came in with a folder, a face made of stone. "Emily," he said gently, "you have a rare neurodegenerative condition. It's progressive. There's no known cure. Symptoms vary, but based on your scans, it's likely to worsen." Her hand tightened in mine. Then slowly, let go. I watched her face shift, not shock, not sadness. Just a quiet kind of surrender. Like part of her had always known. I couldn't breathe. Driving home that night, she stared out the window. "Do you still love me?" she asked suddenly. "Of course I do. But, what if I forget who you are?" I pulled over. Put my forehead to hers. "Then I'll remind you. Every day. For as long as it takes." Her lips trembled. She kissed me like it was the last time. And maybe it was, in some way. Because from that night on, Emily began to fade. And I began to fall apart. She was slipping away, and I was forgetting how to hold on. There's no handbook for watching someone you love disappear piece by piece. No script. No warning. Just days that get darker and nights that stretch too long. Emily was no longer the woman I met on that sunlit porch. Some mornings, she didn't know who I was. She'd wake up in a panic, hands trembling, accusing me of breaking in. Other days, she'd be sweet and quiet, clinging to memories that may or may not have been real. Once, she mistook me for her brother. Another time, she told me she missed the boy with the camera, not realizing that was me. Every time it happened, I died a little more. I kept working less and less. I stopped picking up photography gigs altogether. My gear gathered dust in the closet. I barely left the house unless I had to. The fridge was usually empty, laundry piled up, but none of it mattered. My world had shrunk to one person, and even she was drifting. I became dull. A shadow of the man I'd been. I looked in the mirror one day and barely recognized the face staring back. Hollow eyes. Stubble that wouldn't go away. Shoulders hunched under a weight I couldn't name. People stopped calling. Friends faded away like background noise. They didn't know what to say. I didn't blame them. One night, I found her sitting on the bathroom floor again. She was scribbling something on the back of a cereal box with a broken crayon. When I looked closer, my heart stopped. It was my name. written over and over again in uneven letters. Dozens of times. Like she was trying to memorize it before it vanished. I dropped to my knees, held her close, and sobbed into her hair. "I'm still here," I whispered. But even I wasn't sure anymore. That was the night I realized love wasn't enough. Not by itself. You can love someone with every piece of your soul, but if something is pulling them away, an illness, a storm, fate itself, sometimes love can't hold them. But I wasn't going to let her go. I made her tea in the mornings, even when she forgot to drink it. I played her favorite music, even when she didn't react. I started writing down our memories, every trip, every laugh, every stupid joke, into a journal I kept by her bedside. I whispered those stories to her at night, like bedtime prayers, hoping something deep inside her would remember. Some nights, I heard her crying in her sleep. And sometimes, she called my name like it still meant something. That gave me enough to keep going. Still, I was breaking. There was a moment, a bad day, when she looked at me and said, clear as glass, "I don't know you." I froze. She walked right past me like I was furniture. I locked myself in the bedroom and screamed into a pillow until my throat burned. It was worse than death. It was being forgotten by the only person who ever really saw me. But I refused to surrender. I couldn't. There had to be more. A reason. A cure. A secret the doctors had missed. I began to dig. I started researching her condition. Medical forums, obscure studies, journals written in language I didn't understand. I emailed neurologists, begged for second opinions, searched for clinical trials, anything. Something inside me shifted. It was like a match had been lit in the dark. I might have been a shadow, but shadows move. And I was going to move through hell if I had to. I didn't know it yet, but I was standing at the edge of something bigger than both of us. Because Emily's illness wasn't what they told us. They said it was incurable. They said to accept it. But I couldn't. I don't know what drove me harder, hope or desperation. But once I started digging, I couldn't stop. I was up at all hours, combing through academic papers I could barely understand, watching lectures from specialists halfway across the world. I joined online support groups, forums, anything that might hold a clue. I was looking for a pattern. A crack in the system. Anything they missed. Emily's diagnosis felt too vague. Too convenient. Then I found something. Late one night, bleary-eyed and halfway through a rabbit hole of rare neurological disorders, I stumbled onto an obscure blog post written by a former lab technician named Martin Blake. It detailed a small group of patients misdiagnosed with neurodegenerative illnesses, but who were, in reality, part of an unauthorized clinical drug trial gone wrong. The drug's effects mimicked dementia, but weren't permanent. If treated in time, recovery was possible. My chest tightened. The symptoms were nearly identical to Emily's. There was no name for the drug. No legal acknowledgement of the trial. Just a cryptic mention of a private research facility outside of Seattle and a warning, they'll bury it if they can. I sat there in the dark, heart pounding, fingers trembling. Emily had participated in a sleep therapy study 2 years before we met. She barely remembered it. Said it was just something she tried once to help with insomnia. But I remembered the paperwork she'd accidentally left on the counter, medical consent forms, lots of fine print. Something didn't feel right. I drove to Seattle the next morning. Didn't even think twice. The research facility was quiet, clinical, too polished. They told me the company, Novavita Neurotech, had dissolved. The staff had relocated. No further information could be shared for privacy and legal reasons. But I wasn't just a man anymore. I was something else now, something sharper. Quieter. More dangerous. I followed breadcrumbs. Searched property records. Found a name, Dr. Colin Mercer, the former head of neurodevelopment at Novavita. I tracked him to a private residence in Bellevue. When I showed up at his door, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "I don't want trouble," he said, voice shaking. "Then tell me the truth," I growled. "Tell me what you did to her." He didn't deny it. Couldn't. The story spilled out. Novavita had tested a prototype neuroinhibitor meant to enhance lucid dreaming. In some patients, it caused severe neuroregression, memory fragmentation, emotional disconnect. The damage, they said, was likely irreversible. "But not certain," I said. "No," Mercer admitted. "If caught early enough, there's a counteragent. It was shelved when the program was shut down. Too risky. But it exists." I slammed my hands on the table. "Where is it?" He hesitated, then scribbled something on a scrap of paper. "A location. An old pharmaceutical storage facility on the outskirts of Tacoma. Abandoned," he said. "Forgotten. But maybe the agent was still there." I didn't wait. That night, I broke into the compound, just me, a flashlight, and a desperation that burned hotter than fear. The place was decaying, a labyrinth of dust and rusted steel. Alarms were long dead. But the cold still clung to everything like a memory. I searched for hours. Found nothing. Until I did. Buried behind a sealed cabinet in the sub-level storage room were half a dozen vials labeled only with coded numbers and an old, faded Novavita logo. I recognized the compound name from Mercer's scribbled note. This was it. I took them all. Drove straight to a neurologist I'd connected with online, someone who had heard whispers of this case but never seen it in the wild. She was skeptical, furious I'd taken such risks, but she tested the compound. And her voice cracked when she said it. This might work. The treatment had to be slow. Gradual. Calibrated to avoid system shock. We began that night. Emily didn't know what was happening. Some days, she didn't even remember my name. But I held her hand anyway, every minute, every dose. And then, one morning, weeks into the trial, she looked at me, really looked at me, and said the words I hadn't heard in months. "Hey. Why are you crying?" I broke. Collapsed into her arms and wept. Because for the first time in so long, she was back. Not fully. Not yet. But the fog had cracked. And through it, her eyes were finding me again. I had become unrecognizable. And somehow, I was okay with that. Saving Emily changed me. Not all at once. Not in some grand, cinematic way. It was slower than that, like water carving stone. Quiet. Persistent. Permanent. The man I'd been before, the one who photographed mountains and chased light across cities, he was gone. Replaced by someone harder. More focused. Less afraid of breaking rules. There were still setbacks. Some days, Emily would wake with the same blank stare, speaking to people who weren't there. Other days, she would grip my hand and whisper full paragraphs from old memories, our first coffee date, the paint on her sweater, the first time I told her I loved her. Progress wasn't linear. It never is. But every glimpse of her, the real her, was a victory. Every moment her eyes met mine with recognition was a breath I hadn't known I was holding. But the price? I'd cut ties with everything else. My family barely heard from me. My clients assumed I'd vanished. The photography community I once lived in, people who knew me by my work, my vision, they wouldn't recognize the man I'd become. I hadn't picked up my camera in months. Because nothing else mattered. Nothing except her. I'd stopped being just her boyfriend. I became her nurse, her therapist, her protector, her historian, piecing her life back together when she couldn't remember how it used to look. I memorized her medications. Learned to monitor neurological responses. Sat in on clinical reviews and argued with doctors. I started speaking in terms I barely understood: neuroplasticity, hippocampal regeneration, receptor response times. One day, Emily looked at me and said, "You're not the same." I froze. What do you mean? Her head tilted. You're quieter. Like, something cracked open inside you. She smiled. But I like it. I laughed, but it was hollow. Because she was right. Something had cracked. And what poured out wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was raw survival. It was the version of me that would burn the world down if it meant bringing her back. And I had burned things. Bridges. Careers. Laws. I'd lied, manipulated, stolen. I justified it all in the name of love. And maybe it was love, or maybe it was obsession. But I didn't care. Because the woman I loved was laughing again. Smiling at small things. Sketching in the mornings, even if the lines didn't always make sense. She could sit on the porch again, humming songs I hadn't heard in over a year. She started asking me questions. Real questions. What happened to us? Why do you look so tired? Where did all this sadness come from? I couldn't always answer. I didn't want to dump it on her, the weight of everything I'd done to get us here. But late one night, sitting together on the roof of her house like we used to, she touched my face and said, "You carried me through hell, didn't you?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She already knew. We sat in silence, stars overhead, the wind soft and forgiving for once. I looked at her and realized something that nearly undid me. I had become someone else. Not by choice. Not overnight. But through fire. I was no longer just the man who fell in love with her. I was the man who held on, through madness, through erasure, through the loss of everything else. And in that transformation, something strange had happened. I no longer feared losing her. Not because it wouldn't hurt, but because I had loved her so completely, so fiercely, that even if she vanished tomorrow, I'd know I gave her everything. Every breath. Every part of myself. And that made the pain worth it. To love someone is to hurt when they hurt. To break when they break. To lose, and still choose to love again. It's been 9 months since Emily said my name with clarity. 9 months since her eyes locked with mine and I saw her, truly saw her, standing in front of me, still fighting. And now? Now I sit by her hospital bed, holding a hand that barely moves. The treatment worked, for a while. It gave us borrowed time. A stolen spring. A few months of sunlight we were never meant to have. We danced in the kitchen again. She painted. I took photos of her in the garden, laughing in ways that almost made me forget what we'd been through. She remembered things, not all at once, but enough. Enough to love me back. We even talked about getting married. No rush, she said. We already lived like forever had started. But forever is a fragile thing. Her condition began to fight back. Subtler this time, but smarter, slipping through cracks the doctors couldn't seal. A second wave. More aggressive. Less responsive. They told me not to hope. But I did. Every day. Until she slipped into the coma. It's been 2 weeks now. I come in every morning. Read her the old journal I kept during her decline, all the moments she missed. I whisper our story into her ear like a bedtime fable. The doctors tell me she might still hear me. So I talk. I talk until my voice cracks, until the tears come silently. I talk until the silence in the room feels heavier than anything I can carry. Because this is what love is. It's not the grand gestures. It's not the fireworks or the photo-worthy moments. It's this. A chair by a hospital bed. A hand held through silence. 1,000 I love yous spoken to someone who may never say it back. I used to think love was about forever. But I know now, it's about now. What you give when you have nothing left. Who you are when the world takes everything. How far you'll go to hold on to someone, even if it means losing yourself. They ask me if I regret it. If I'd do it all again, knowing how it ends. The pain. The ruin. The heartbreak. And my answer is always the same. Yes. 1,000 times, yes. Because for a season, she was mine. And I was hers. And in that window of time, that fragile, stolen window, we lived something that most people never even get close to. Real love. The kind that doesn't flinch at fear. The kind that walks through fire. The kind that stays. She opened her eyes this morning. Just for a second. And I swear, she smiled. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if she's coming back. But I'm here. I'll always be here. Because love and pain are not opposites. They're two sides of the same truth. And if love is the story, then pain is just the echo that proves it was real.